All right, everybody. Pat Leonard here from the New York Daily News and the Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard podcast on the Believe Network. This is Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard live Thanksgiving preview edition. Giants, Cowboys, some NFL action. Fun times during the holidays, obviously. You get a lot of football, a lot of days with at least one game, so you don't have to wait for the next time you're going to get the NFL action. It doesn't go from week 11 to week 12, and you're sitting twiddling your thumbs, waiting for Thursday night, waiting for Sunday. We have Black Friday football with Prime Video. It's all chock full. I know I had that fun game I received from Amazon. It's Black Friday Bingo, playing that with the Chiefs Raiders game. That's going to be fun sitting there with the family once I get off the plane from Dallas. But that's what we're here to talk about first. We're here to talk about the Giants and the Cowboys. Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, high stakes for them coming off of a disastrous loss against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after the Giants had their bye. Stakes of job status, potential firings coming if they don't get a result. If we see more plays on the field where it's fair to question players' efforts, everything is on the table right now. Pressure ratcheted up. I was in the Giants locker room today, Tuesday, November 26th, talking to players, listening to Brian Daboll conduct his press conference before they conducted a walkthrough practice where Drew Lock ended up finally taking some reps. A lot happening with the Giants, a lot evolving. It's almost like if you miss 24 hours worth of news with the Giants, you are so far behind. And that's why we're here, to catch you up on the Giants, to talk a little NFL, and to talk whether it's Malik Nabers, Tommy DeVito, the injury report for the game, the recent history of this rivalry. And of course, we're going to give you our Estate 98 Giants trivia question, give you guys a chance to win a free bottle of a specialty coffee concentrate that sponsors our podcast here and that we highly recommend for cold or hot coffee on the go. And thank you first to our sponsors. I want to start with MyBookie. MyBookie rolls out the red carpet for sports bettors, especially on these Thursday games. They have risk-free bets, but for Thanksgiving, they have some extra special bets. Now, it's important for you to go and sign up with MyBookie right now because my Pat's picks were undefeated 3-0 in week 12. We had the Buccaneers, the Lions, and the Broncos all covering against the spread, making you money there. Also, my understanding is the deal we have running right now is not going to last forever, might end after Thanksgiving and change. So here's the deal. You sign up, you click on the link in my social media profile, you go and make your first deposit and use the promo code Pat's Picks, and you can get a 100% match on that first deposit all the way up to $1,000. So if you deposit $1,000 for your first deposit, you will get an extra grand in your account to spend and play with on MyBookie and keep winning with Pat's Picks. You also get a $10 casino chip. So go do that today. And here's some fun deals they have going as well. Number one, a Thanksgiving risk-free boost with MyBookie. So the bet can't lose. Here's how it works. They're boosting the odds that Devon Achane, the Miami Dolphins running back, is going to score the first touchdown when the Dolphins play the Packers on Thanksgiving. So if he hits and he scores that first touchdown, you win the bet. If it doesn't, they refund the wager. Max bet there is $25. And another fun thing, the Thanksgiving Telegram pool. I don't know if you're familiar with Telegram and that app, but join the pool that grows with every sign-up. Subscribe to MyBookie's Telegram channel before Sunday, December 1st, and guarantee yourself a share of $15,000 in free play. All subscribers to the Telegram channel will share in the free play. The prize pool starts at $15,000 and grows by $5,000 for every 1,000 new subscribers between November 25th and December 1st. So fun things going on at MyBookie. And also check back on my social media channels, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Threads, X, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And on Wednesday and Thursday, you can find my Pat's Picks. I'll pick all the Thursday games just to have some fun with it, pick all those Thanksgiving games, get you guys going, get you started for the weekend, and also give you my Pat's Picks for the weekend coming up in week 13. And of course, the Giants sprinkle coming for Thanksgiving. Stay tuned for that. Also brought to you here by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. Right over here over my shoulder, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants, and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today. Use the promo code TalkinBall25 or click on the QR code on your screen, and you'll get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. So go to boomchaga.com, order one bag on the subscribe and save option with Talkin' Ball 25. You'll get the discount, and you could also always cancel the subscription after that first purchase. No harm done there. No penalty for canceling. Or if you like the product, you can stick with Boom Chaga. Boomchaga.com. Start feeling the difference today. And last but not least, brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee. Talking Ball with Pat Leonard is brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, a specialty coffee concentrate that's perfect for when you want to make a quick cup and skip the lines. It takes me less than 10 seconds to make an Estate 98 iced or hot coffee. It's delicious. It's also great as a mixer for espresso martinis, and each bottle can make up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/talkingball and get an exclusive offer for 80% off your first order. And we'll roll right into our Estate 98 Giants trivia question. If you're unfamiliar, every week we do a free giveaway. I will ask you a Giants trivia question. The first correct answer in our comment section in the chat wins a free bottle of Estate 98 coffee. If you win, you'll direct message me your address or a P.O. box, and Estate 98 will mail you a free bottle of that specialty coffee concentrate. So your question is straightforward and simple. The Giants are playing here on Thanksgiving. The Giants have played 17 times on Thanksgiving. And most recently, obviously, they played in Dallas as well in 2022 and lost 28-20. Trivia question is, what is the Giants' most recent victory on Thanksgiving? Give me the year and give me the opponent. For bonus points, you could give me the final score and also the Giant who scored the only touchdown in the game. So again, your Giants Estate 98 trivia question of the day. Which is the most recent victory for the Giants on Thanksgiving? So which year did they win their most recent victory on Thanksgiving? Who did they beat? And the bonus questions, just to show everybody how big of a Giants fan you are and how much you know, is what was the score and who scored the winning touchdown for the Giants. Wow. That was an immediate answer there from Benjamin with the victory over the Lions in 1982 and the touchdown scored by Lawrence Taylor. That was immediate. He knows what he's talking about. See, there's D-Kit saying as well, 13-6 in Detroit. That was the score. You guys know what you're talking about. Lawrence Taylor scored the touchdown. Who did he intercept? Who threw the interception that Lawrence Taylor returned 97 yards in the fourth quarter? Well done. Well done. All right, let's see. Let's get into the queue. Reminder, everybody, thanks for being here, first of all. Secondly, as I see the super chats rolling in, the best way to have your comment or question answered is to pay for a super chat. It will elevate your comment or question to the top of the queue. I will continue to go through the questions and the queue and the comments and try to get to as many as I can throughout. But I really appreciate the support. And thank you so much to everybody who contributes and keeps supporting Talkin' Ball live here on the Believe Network and on my YouTube channel, PL on NFL. Remember, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And if you're already subscribed and you're here watching, listening, and participating in Talkin' Ball Live, please hit those thumbs up. Please hit those like buttons while we are live. That helps create additional engagement, tells that YouTube algorithm to go reach out and find those Giants fans who somehow still don't know what we're talking about. The NFL fans who somehow still don't know that you can find out first what's happening with the Giants and in the NFL here, and brings them over to the channel. If you're listening on the Believe Network on Apple or Spotify, thank you for tuning in. Please consider joining us next time live on YouTube. As you guys see, there are a couple super chats in the queue already. We will start with those and then get back into the queue. The best way to support our channel, those super chats, also by supporting our sponsors. So MyBookie, Boom Chaga, and Estate 98. All right. Here we go. Chris Spires checks in with a $5 super chat. Chris, thank you very much. How you doing? Chris says, do you think if the Giants fire the GM, they hire from within? That's what the Giants normally do. Chris, that would be a possibility for sure. Brandon Brown obviously is an up-and-comer in the industry. Chris Rossetti, honestly, I think is an interesting name as well. I'm not saying he's ready to be a general manager yet, but he is somebody who I would want to continue to pick his brain and talk more to him about personnel and about his ideas about team building, because from what I understand, talking to people and also from watching him on Hard Knocks, I think we can all agree that he seemed to be somebody who was dispassionately evaluating things, more accurately than some others were. And so those are two names that would jump out to me. I've said here before, I'll say again, I think Tim McDonnell, director of personnel, nephew to John Mara. So ties to ownership, but also personnel chops. I think he's somebody who has continued to rise through the organization, commands a lot of respect, and would also be someone to keep on the radar. I mean, he's very involved already, obviously. You guys saw he was there at Colorado. There were videos that surfaced of Deion Sanders, Tim McDonnell, Brandon Brown, Joe Schoen, and Jesse Armstead out there at Colorado this week. Interesting timing that the Giants are that this is getting pushed and promoted on social media, that they're on the road scouting this. Obviously they need to end up in Dallas anyway. So I guess might as well hit the road and get those extra miles in and get some extra work in on quarterbacks, because that is obviously the market they're in. But, definitely an optics game. The NFL is, and that's what that is. Those are optics. Look at how hard we're working. Right. But that is the job. The job is to get to the bottom of who these players are, who these prospects are, and to pick the ones that make your franchise better, make your team better. And so far, this regime has really struggled to do that. And that's why we are sitting in the position we're in. But Chris, I hope that answers your question. Those are some names that come to mind for me. I'm not saying they're going to hire internally. I would not say that's definitive. I do think my vantage point, this doesn't mean it wouldn't happen, but from my vantage point, Brandon Brown has been right there every step of the way with the decisions that Joe Schoen has made. I don't quite think he would be GM ready. And I also don't think he would be able to separate himself from the results of what has happened here. So that's my take. Obviously, the Giants might have a different take if it comes to that, but that's my 2 cents there. Daniel Hirsch, what's going on with a $10 super chat, says, what was the real story with the Jones re-signing? Who was responsible between coach, general manager, and owners? Well, Daniel, what I know is that, so let's start with who was putting in the work to the 11th hour to get it done. Joe Schoen was in the room along with the Giants salary cap team, right? You have Kevin Abrams involved, you have Ed Triggs involved in the salary cap and the structuring of the contracts, along with the athletes' first agents. But Joe Schoen was grinding away to get that done. Now, John Mara was involved. We do know that John Mara, I believe Albert Breer was the one who reported that John Mara was on the phone with Daniel Jones during that 11th hour in order to help try to get it over the finish line. So that is a detail that we do know. And then, Brian Daboll was involved in bringing him back, obviously, but, re-signing, contract structure, that falls on the general manager, that falls on, ownership. But Daboll, supported it. Certainly when Joe Schoen spoke in his press conference at the bye about admitting that they essentially were drinking their own juice coming off of 2022, there was a thought in the building that, okay, we came in and we proved that we have the coaching ability to make Daniel work and to turn him into that franchise quarterback. And now we have him already in the building. We came in wondering if we actually had one. Now we believe we do. So Daboll was a part of that miscalculation after that promising 2022 season, which obviously was buoyed by an encouraging defense and good game planning, and wasn't exactly like an offense that lit the world on fire, but they got the most out of what they could with Jones and with that offense and with that team. Also had some real good character guys, it turned out, on that team that they've since let go. And we've seen the negative results of that. But Daniel, I don't think it's accurate to point to that situation as John Mara or ownership forcing the hand of the general manager and the coach. I don't think that's accurate. And, but it would also be inaccurate to say that ownership was not involved, right? So that's the best way I could put that. Chris says, if Giants fire coach and GM, I love them to hire a veteran coach and GM. Yeah, I do too, Chris. I think, it tends in the NFL, often it tends to go back and forth between, like, let's say you end up with a coach who is looser with things, right? Like a Pat Shurmur. And then, it gets so loose and players have such free reign and there's so little structure, and you're looking to get back to basics and fundamentals and structure. So in comes a Joe Judge, right? And then, there's a reaction to the end of that tenure where players don't want to practice as hard, and everybody wants to be friends. And so in comes Brian Daboll, and in addition to the fact that the offense needed a huge reboot, as the Giants offense always seems to need. And so Brian Daboll fits that mode. But now it kind of feels like you need to swing that pendulum back. Of course, we all talk about and think about, when we have this conversation, Tom Coughlin, right? Unfortunately, that time has passed, but it's not crazy to sit here and say that what the Giants need is a Coughlin type, in the mold of how you command the room, how you lead the team, how you build a team, how you set expectations, right? I think, like, from my vantage point, I agree with you. I'm not saying Mike Vrabel is going to be their next coach or anything, but that's definitely a name that makes sense as a consideration for that, of course. Now, if they want an offensive coach, now that changes things. I've said before, Brian Flores would be, I think, a good candidate if he wasn't suing the organization for allegedly screwing him over during the last interview process, right? But those are the types of names that come to mind. Belichick, obviously, we've talked about him here, but I don't disagree with you, Chris. And general manager wise, yeah, I think what you want now, this is what's crazy about the Joe Schoen regime. So the crazy thing about the Joe Schoen regime is that as much as Dave Gettleman did a poor job in team building and, had the Giants dug in a steep hole, salary cap wise, roster wise, etc., you can see that Joe Schoen has actually made, Gettleman look like a better drafter, because at least with some of his high draft picks, Dave Gettleman took good players. Now, he didn't build a good team, and he certainly missed on guys like, a DeAndre Baker, let's say, right? And of course, he ended up picking Daniel Jones at a place in the draft where it did turn out that it was too high for the player he ended up being for the organization, right? But, Andrew Thomas, Dexter Lawrence, Saquon Barkley. Of course, Saquon wasn't the right pick at that time for the Giants. They misevaluated, and they were clinging to Eli Manning at that point. But my point is, that was a quote unquote veteran GM or a veteran personnel guy who, at least it seemed like, if you stack that up against Joe Schoen's drafts, at least you can look at the first rounders and say, hey, the Giants actually got some players out of this regime, right? The Giants general manager right now, you're looking at Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal, Deontay Banks, Malik Nabers, and even you look at those second round picks, right? A Wan'Dale Robinson, a John Michael Schmitz, a Tyler Nubin right now, still in his first year, but it's just not good enough, And so I think from a personnel standpoint, you need to get back to basics of, can we just please, when we have significant and valuable draft capital, can we please just get players in the building who can start games and be, at a reliable level, right? So, really good comments and questions there. Thank you for the super chats and the super stickers. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, to your family. I hope everybody gets to spend a lot of time with their family this Thanksgiving weekend, this holiday weekend. I hope you, enjoy all the sides as I do. I'll eat turkey or ham. I'm more of a ham guy, but whatever's on the table. Love the sides. Love the sweet potatoes, the candied sweet potatoes. I love putting like 50 things on my plate and just kind of eating it all at once. That's me. And won't be with my family on Thanksgiving because I'll be at Jerry World, AT&T Stadium, but Jerry Jones takes pretty good care of us. And so be down there and looking forward to seeing some friends. And even though it will be either Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito versus Cooper Rush instead of Dak Prescott versus Daniel Jones as the season started, looking forward to some fireworks because we all know that they're going to come. Some stats to give you guys before I jump in with Manzo's comment here. The Giants have lost their last 7 games to the Dallas Cowboys. So they're 0-7 in their last 7. They're also 1-14 in their last 15 games against the Cowboys. That includes an 0-5 record against the Dallas Cowboys under Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. And they have been outscored in those 5 games 160-68. That includes a loss in 2022. Their first loss to the Cowboys, actually, 23-16 at home to Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys. Cooper Rush, obviously, a cup of coffee with the Giants, now with the Cowboys, and a capable starter. He's not going to shred a defense typically with his arm, but he can manage a game, balance a game out, and certainly the Giants defense is a defense that can be taken advantage of by a sound and disciplined Cowboys team. Now, the Giants and Cowboys both have injuries. We'll get into that. We'll talk about Malik Nabers and we'll talk about the quarterbacks and whatever else you guys want. But I do want to get into the questions, and that can get us going on all of those topics. All right, Manzo, what do you got? Let's see. Manzo says, thanks for keeping it real and not pushing the Giants narrative like most of the beat writers do. We can see through the bullshit. John Dorsey for GM and Vrabel for head coach. Manzo, I don't hate that. I don't hate that combo, John Dorsey, Vrabel. Don't hate it at all. Dorsey, seasoned personnel guy, no nonsense. Vrabel, a guy who's going to get the locker room and the team in check. The Giants do have a leadership problem, I think. Like, there are some leaders in the locker room. But this is what happens when a general manager like Joe Schoen misevaluates and doesn't fully grasp and understand the value of a guy like Saquon Barkley to a team. Like, as Darius Slayton told me, Saquon Barkley was bigger than football as far as what his role was with this Giants team. He was part of the fabric. He was keeping a lot of it together, especially when times were tough. And you heard Teddy Bruschi on NFL Countdown on Sunday say that Joe Schoen let the culture walk out the door when he let Saquon Barkley walk out the door, because Saquon was the culture. This is our first Talking Ball live with Pat Leonard since Saquon went absolutely bonkers in Los Angeles against the Rams at 302 total yards, 255 yards rushing, including 2 touchdowns over 70 yards, 70 exactly, and 72, I believe. It's almost unfathomable how worst case scenario this season has unfolded for Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, and for the Giants. Even if it went badly and their decision backfired on them, first of all, for everyone to have seen how poorly it went down and how it happened on Hard Knocks, And then for Saquon Barkley to not only be having a strong season, but to be in the conversation as a top MVP candidate, which, by the way, if you guys have been following and watching my episodes with Benny Fowler on Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard podcast, we've been talking about Saquon Barkley as a strong MVP candidate, like a top 5, top 3 MVP candidate for at least the last 2 weeks prior to this last game. And had him on the board in, I think, in 4 or 5, the 4 or 5 slot a couple weeks ago. And then prior to last week, we had him in the top 3, and I had him as in contention for 1 already. So now he does this to the Rams, and it's over the top. It is literally leading all of the shows around the country: Saquon Barkley, the Eagles, and the Giants. It is truly a worst case scenario. Antonio says, "What's up, Pat? Do you expect DeVito to play?" I don't know, Antonio. I have questions. Definitely sketchy how this was handled. DeVito obviously got pummeled on Sunday by the Buccaneers, then somehow wasn't on the injury report on Monday, even though several Giants were. And then here on Tuesday, Brian Daboll suddenly announces that Tommy DeVito's arm is sore, and so he's going to be limited. Then we go and talk to DeVito, who is now on the injury report. Obviously, he was banged up on Monday, too, and the Giants just didn't put him on it. Daboll claims he didn't know he was hurt or banged up until Tuesday morning. But then DeVito says, yeah, my neck's kind of stiff, my body's sore, my whole body's sore. All those hits are adding up and taking a toll. So, just a circus. And now we have Drew Lock taking some reps during the walkthrough here on Tuesday in East Rutherford at the Giants facility. We weren't able to monitor or watch the Giants walkthrough. They didn't have uniforms on. It was literally a walkthrough, in their gym clothes, essentially, on the field. But Brian Daboll doesn't give reps to guys when they're not the starter. So to give Drew Lock some reps, and then Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito both do their press conferences. And so usually the starter does a presser. So the fact that they both had to do one indicates they truly are both options going into this game. Tommy DeVito said the plan is to play, but we will see tomorrow, meaning Wednesday, when he might try to, open it up and throw a little bit. I get the sense. I also think from a roster and team management standpoint, I mean, first of all, we know that they can step in it and not do the right thing. So this doesn't mean they're not going to do this. But to me, you skip over Drew Lock. It's humiliating. It's poor management. It's poor roster management. It reflects poorly on your own personnel evaluations as an organization. You skip over him to Tommy DeVito, which looks like an optics-driven decision to try to get the fans riled up as well, to try, as Brian Daboll said, they were just trying to put the best, offense on the field. He thought it was going to light a spark. Obviously, completely backfires. But how do you now, with DeVito banged up, how do you go to Lock as like, oh, yeah, he might start, he might play, start giving him reps, and then pull him right back out and say, oh, no, never mind, we're not going to go with that. That would be cruel. Obviously, it's the professionals, it's the NFL. Guys have to deal with the business side of it. But to me, DeVito got smoked. He actually got banged up, he said, especially near the end of the game. If you remember, the Giants were the Giants were down 30-7. The game was over. And really, he took at least 3, maybe 4 big hits down the stretch of that game in the last 5 minutes, including, I think, 2 in the final minute. Basically, Brian Daboll and the Giants were just throwing the ball, trying to score more points to make the final score look better. And Tommy DeVito takes several extra hits while doing that. So everything's great here at the play, Mrs. Lincoln. So that's where we're at with the Giants. Jacob, great to see you. He says, my Yukon Huskies lost today in Hawaii. He says, Pat, isn't it weird how Nabers said today he should have said it differently, but he stands with what he said? It's obvious Daboll, Schoen, or Mara ripped into him. Well, it's also interesting that he got called to the principal's office, and also very important to note that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll both talked to Malik Nabers in that conversation. This is something I've been stressing to everybody as people try to dissect where the blame should fall and whether, okay, does Joe Schoen get fired and not Daboll? Is it Daboll and not Schoen, and Schoen stays? To me, this is such a general manager-driven operation, and he and Daboll are both tied at the hip. So if you notice when you watch, a lot of the times they're doing those press conferences and they're both sitting up there together next to each other, looking like the package deal, the collaborative group, right? That's all they talk about. Collaboration. We're both involved in everything. If you're both involved in everything, how do you blame one and not the other, right? Number two, Joe Schoen has been in the locker room several times, talking to players in the locker room. Very interesting, but he's everywhere. He's involved in everything. He's in the Giants film sessions, the Mondays after their games, the general manager in there with the coaches and the players. He's got his hands in everything. And so he's got his hands in this conversation with Malik Nabers as well. And obviously, no one has more riding on Malik Nabers, not calling them soft and basically blitzing their entire operation than Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, because essentially Nabers not only questioning their game planning and the coach's play calling, but also, it's good for Nabers to stress this isn't good enough, because he's 100% right and nobody should be okay with it. But the idea that a 21-year-old rookie feels like he can go up there and say that reflects on Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll when they were deciding who they're selecting in this draft. It's like, okay, is this a player whose intensity we can manage and harness in the right way, right? So this could be something that helps the Giants if they listen to him. They try to get him the ball more, and they start calling more plays for him, better plays for him. They get more creative and that kind of thing. But Malik Nabers' frustration and intensity also could help be what undoes them, because it resulted and was a huge part and a headlining part of an explosive locker room that essentially turned the Giants organization on its head after this Buccaneers loss, with Jermaine Illuminor, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Malik Nabers, Darius Slayton, all these guys saying essentially enough is enough. And so fascinating where Nabers is now. Some highlights of what he said today. You're right. He said, so I asked him what Joe Schoen and Daboll said to him and how that meeting went. And he said that we talked about it, that they know he's a competitor, and that Schoen and Daboll said that after watching the film, they don't think the Giants played soft, like Nabers said after the game. And so Nabers says, after I looked, it wasn't soft. It was just a lack of technique and communication. But he also says, and we didn't have the authority to go out there and win. We didn't have the grit to go out there and win the game. So, really, this is just different ways of saying effort. Dexter Lawrence he was not happy with the media, feeling like the media misled what he and some of the players said about being soft. And he tried to, or what Dex's point of view was that he said they played soft as far as tackling and execution, but not that they were soft in terms of effort. But, that's fine that he thinks that. But here's the thing. If you say an athlete or a team is soft, soft is soft. Like, that's what that means. Soft means soft. And Brian Daboll said on his Zoom call on Monday, he admitted, there were some instances. He did admit it. He also, instead of calling it effort, he said there were plays where guys need to chase the ball better. I mean, what are we talking about here? Now Nabers is saying, yeah, we weren't soft. We just need more authority and grit in how we play. It's all the same description. We've all seen the clips. There aren't many players on the Giants roster that you can say that there wasn't at least one play in that Buccaneers game where they didn't look like they were giving 100%. Jermaine Illuminor was walking back some of his comments today in the locker room as well. It's very clear that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are working, and the organization is working very hard to try to publicly make it look better than it did on Sunday. Jacob says, smack that like and sub button for the best reporter in the business. Thank you, Jacob. He says, Pat, not sure if you saw the video on Brown and Shane in Boulder watching Colorado practice. Who was the other guy with them? Yeah, that was Tim McDonald and Jesse Armstead. Chronicle says, Pat, I think you're right, at least with Daboll. He has lost the locker room, and it's out of control. There is no leadership on this team. Daboll press conferences are starting to piss me off after the losses, especially. Yeah, one thing that bothers me now, Daboll obviously, like, there's some questions where even if he knows the answer is a certain thing, he can't, like, for example, if Daboll were to say, yes, I've lost the locker room, right? Or yes, guys were quitting all over the field. Those are things where he's essentially signing his own pink slip. So it's not like you're expecting a coach to say, oh yeah, like, we have bad effort all over the place. Cause then the owner can, right? Like, that's, so I understand, and you don't expect people to say those types of things. But what bugs you is when he says, we had a good week of practice. That is a really bothersome comment after games like these. You can't say that. You can't say after your team looks like it doesn't practice that you had a good week of practice. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. You don't get paid to have a good week of practice. You get paid to win games. And if you play poorly and you see guys not giving 100% and players are noting that and players are saying that you're playing soft as a team, then you're not practicing the right way or well enough. Jacob says, just out of curiosity, can the Giants specifically not allow a reporter to interview coaches, players, et cetera, if the organization thinks they're not being fair or something like that? There have been instances where reporters have been, banned or like have their credentials revoked for, severely breaking rules that are, outlined clearly, or like if you were to make something, terribly and unfairly and unprofessionally personal, and then that crosses the professional line. And, that has happened before, but just for being critical, no, you can't prevent that. I mean, there are instances where people say no comment. There are rules in place that require players and coaches and assistant coaches and coordinators for different, for different timelines to have to talk a certain amount of times, whether it's players during the week or players after the game or the coach, how many times during the week. So those things are required. And like, for example, if there were a player who was refusing to talk week in and week out, they are required to be available. And so if they're not, and it gets to that point, to a contentious point, a player can be reported to the league for that, for example. But yeah, you do have instances of that, but really you're not going to be able to, a reporter's not going to be eliminated from a locker room or from covering a team without cause. Elias, what's going on? Thank you so much for the super chat. Elias says, Pat, do you think Brandon Brown stays if Joe gets canned? What are players' thoughts on him? And would Mara let him run this and take Shedeur Sanders? Elias, I don't know if he would stay. He's certainly a candidate to stay, given that young up-and-comer as he's considered in the business. I don't know if he's general manager ready. I do think he's been party to a lot of their mistakes here. Not a fan. So I would personally not do that. Like retain him if Shane were canned, if and when Shane was canned. I think the Giants need somebody with more experience and proof of substance is my take on that. He's had a pretty high level position here. Could have had a stronger voice to stop some of the colossal mistakes they've made. And then quarterback, we'll see. I mean, if they have, obviously they need a quarterback. Would it be Shedeur? Too early to say. Obviously, they're doing their homework on that, as they should and need to. Let's see. So before I get into the queue again, let me tell you what I think about the headline I put on this was, are Joe Schoen's and Brian Daboll's jobs on the line in this game specifically? And I think the answer is yes. I think we are on firing watch. Obviously, you guys know, I thought we were on it, basically at the start of the season, especially with how they started the year and, anticipating that with a start to that season, the heat would turn up immediately. And, I think that there is a chance that if Thursday is embarrassing, that there are firings right on Friday. Maybe that would be the coach, and then the general manager would get fired at the end of the year. That would be a possibility. Maybe John Mara and Steve Tisch would still just drag it out and, suffer the consequences of dysfunction for several more weeks before actually pulling the trigger there. But I'm just saying that I do think we're at the moment now and the point now where it's gotten embarrassing enough. The discourse has gotten to a certain level, nationally. John Mara is being talked about. You even saw on Monday Night Football, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman just steered into a tangent on how much sleep John Mara has to be losing watching Saquon Barkley go off as an MVP candidate for his rival Philadelphia Eagles. Meanwhile, the guy, Daniel Jones, that they signed in order to not sign and to tag and eventually let go Saquon Barkley, was just shut down by the organization and released. So it turned from a decision of which one do we prefer to now they have neither. And that brings me to that question earlier, our first super chat question. The crazy part about the Daniel Jones decision, and I should have mentioned this in that answer, but I'll tell you now, who asked me that question early on. That was Chris, I believe. No, Daniel Hirsch. So the one crazy part about the Daniel Jones re-signing and the Saquon Barkley tag is that, to the best of my knowledge, the Giants' initial plan, Joe Schoen's initial plan, the Giants' initial plan, it was to sign Saquon and tag Daniel Jones. And then they couldn't get the deal done with Saquon because Schoen only wanted to go to a certain level in paying Saquon. So then that got contentious, and Joe Schoen and the Giants said, this is your deadline or we're pulling this off the table. And once they got to that point, they did just that, and they flipped. And they, instead of signing Saquon and tagging Daniel for one season, they tagged Saquon and they signed Daniel to a massive contract. Now, how does that make any sense? If you think about it this way, if you were a general manager of a team and you had a quarterback and a weapon running back there, and you decided based on your evaluation that the quarterback wasn't worth a long-term contract. He was worth a franchise tag, and probably more money than you wanted to pay on that one season, but you decided he wasn't worth a long-term deal. He hadn't proven that yet, so you're going to tag him. And then you'll sign the weapon, right? Imagine how opposite the logic is for you to then do the other thing, to sign the quarterback to the long extension who you just decided you didn't want to give more than a year, and to give the running back the weapon who turns out also is the most key leader on your team, the franchise tag. And then those negotiations get even more contentious. And then that results in him walking out the door, going to your rival. And then the player that you initially had said wasn't good enough, who you then signed to a 4-year, $160 million extension anyway, because it didn't go the way that you envisioned with the other player. Now you can't make him any better than you thought he was. Now you're releasing him, and now you don't have either player. Unbelievable. All right, let's see. Chronicle says Dexter really attacked y'all on the being soft thing today. Poor Jordan Rodon. No, I mean, I don't think that was an attack. I mean, I think that's a player trying. Listen, that's a hard conversation to have after that locker room disperses and the team comes back on Monday and Tuesday, and you have the general manager and the coach and people, telling players to stop saying things like that, and to, and basically this was interesting. John Runyon Jr. told us they had this like big film session on Monday, grinding the tape of the game on Sunday. Then Micah McFadden revealed it wasn't really that long of a film session. We just watched a handful of clips where Daboll was showing us plays where guys gave us a lot of effort. So there was a huge push internally from the leadership to, no, like we were trying hard. Guys were trying hard. You guys were wrong. You shouldn't have said that. And so Dexter Lawrence, who has been the face of the team and is as frustrated as anybody, and also had a very poor game and was party to all the problems that the Giants team had in that game. Dexter Lawrence was. So, he can point the finger at himself first, and that's what he does, right? That's what he has to do. He's their best player, but he wasn't good enough, just like everybody else in that game. But Dexter is trying to stand up for the team, trying to put a better face on the way that they're talking about themselves and trying to get his team going. Now, I prefer the Malik Nabers, like, this isn't good enough, we need to change and fix it now thing as far as leadership, to the Dexter Lawrence, like, hey, the media made something up or misconstrued what we said. I prefer the one to the other. But, I don't really think that's an attack as much as it's just everybody's on edge right now, Chronicles. Savage Steve says, I feel like I'm watching a movie that I've seen 1,000 times. Love to watch something new and different. No doubt, Steve. No doubt. Yeah, I got an email from a fan the other day that said, Pat, are you tired of writing the same story? I guess the guy meant, the tone of my coverage or whatever. But I said, yes, I am tired of watching losing football all the time and watching regimes change and turnover and people leave. I mean, especially, I've said this before, but as a reporter, it gets really tiresome establishing relationships and connections and, getting closer to people, making making friends eventually once you know people for long enough, like Benny Fowler, who I do the podcast with now. Super Bowl champion, former Denver Bronco, was on the Giants. I met him when he was with the Giants, and we're co-workers now, but like we're good friends, you know. And so you just hate seeing people get shown the door all the time. So the turnover, the losing, like winning will help everybody. I can't wait. Ken says, I fully expect Thursday to be ugly beyond belief and something Daboll cannot survive. I agree. Cameron says, this team is obviously losing on purpose. Shedeur Sanders is their top draft prospect. Why so much outrage? Cameron, the scary thing is I don't think they are losing on purpose. That's what's scary because John, I've said this before. And, I wrote on Sunday, if this isn't tanking, it sure looks like it. But that's because that's what it is. Like, how could you couldn't be worse if you were tanking than what the Giants are. So it's fair to say, is that what they're doing? Right, Cameron? But I promise you, like for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, they can't tank and save their jobs. They can't do that. I think 2022, they definitely welcomed a higher pick than they ended up getting, right? They won more games than they expected. But to tank now at this point, I do think some of the decisions they made have been ridiculous and have made the team worse. And I think it was fair, especially when they jumped over Drew Lock to Tommy DeVito. It was fair to wonder, like, oh, they are really trying to win and asking that question. And then Daboll said, yeah, we think we're going to light a spark. We think he's going to spark us like he did the last time. So, I mean, that's where we're at. Solving says, thanks for asking Daboll serious and tough questions. Does he seem content and unbothered? Seems like a guy that knows his job is safe no matter what. No, I view him more as somebody who seems like, he knows the end's coming. He's just trying to not accelerate it by flying off the handle. That's how I view it. Was a little bit more tense today than he has been. Jacob says, Pat, is it me or do Schoen and Daboll not like you because they know you won't bullshit? That's funny. I can't speak for how they feel about me personally. I do think that they prefer people who cover them to be friendly and not press them and not question them. I think there's a lot of people like that, but they especially are like that. And so I think when you do question them or you have information that they prefer that you don't have, they do, tend to bristle at it. I think it's just what I know, how I see the game. If I don't know what I'm watching, I know who to ask to get me the answers to exactly what's going on the field. I have sources in the building, in the locker room. And I think that can unnerve leadership, especially when they're losing and especially when they are people who are so active themselves in trying to craft a narrative and a version of the truth through the media as well. Like I've told you guys that before transparently, all of these NFL teams, the NFL itself, the NFL Players Association, all that, right? There's so much conversation about how many narratives the media is trying to create and generate and manufacture. The teams in the NFL are more active, or, I'm just using them as an example in this business, right? But companies, corporations, like there's no bigger booming business right now than public relations, right? And so they are super active, the Giants, in pushing certain versions of the truth through media and friends of theirs in the media. So it's so disingenuous to say that, reporters like me have an agenda and are, driving at a version of the truth that isn't real or whatever, when, these teams and these leaders play the game as actively as anybody. Steve says, if Daboll gets fired, personally, I would love Vrabel. I think he would set the tone for our defense. It would be the Giants defense you think of when you hear Giants, but he is a defensive coach. D-Pat says, if DeVito was started for the Tank, doesn't that mean Daboll Schoen would need to have a guarantee from Mara for next season before Daboll Joe considered tanking? Right. Yeah. And I think really, I think that they genuinely did start Tommy DeVito thinking he would be their best option, and it backfired in a major way. Now, who knows if it will look dramatically better with Drew in there, if he does end up starting in Dallas. We do know Drew Lock can win football games. We saw him last year with the Seahawks beat the Eagles in Seattle. But this falls on Brian Daboll too. You need to craft better game plans, call better plays, put your players in better positions, and the guys need to execute. But, that Brian Daboll, Shane Bowen versus Todd Bowles and Liam Cohn in that game against the Buccaneers was not a fair fight. Complete outcoaching start to finish, right? And the players also just not playing up to any standard or level that is acceptable. In this game, Mike McCarthy, Mike Zimmer, Brian Daboll, Shane Bowen. Hard to pick the Giants in that matchup on either side of the ball. At best, you have Daboll close to, but not breaking even against Zimmer when you have McCarthy out scheming Bowen. You also have, the fact that Brian Daboll has already played this Cowboys team this year with Daniel Jones at quarterback, and they didn't score a touchdown. They only scored 15 points on 5 field goals, I believe it was. So Giants in jeopardy of not only going 0-8 in their last 8 against the Cowboys and 0-6 with this regime against the Cowboys, but also in jeopardy of playing a full season against them without scoring a touchdown. D-Kid says Shane and Daboll are not acting like a bunch of guys about to be fired. I wouldn't say that, D-Kid. I think they actually manage the optics in a big way. I think they're very active with that. So I think Daboll is trying to present a certain face and a certain, even though he's not answering a lot of questions. And, today at practice, he answered several questions, but even though a lot of his answers have been, I respect that. And we practice well, and he's not answering a lot of questions. I think what I've viewed, it seems like he's just trying to stay calm and not react emotionally to anything. Joe Schoen, he's been on the road. I think, from an optics standpoint, it's, hey, look how hard we're working at next year's draft. But I wouldn't say they're working like guys who aren't about to be fired. I'd say they're just guys who are trying to do their jobs and not fuel the flames and feed the fire. That's already as bad as it is. Jacob says, don't worry, Pat, I'm already subscribed. I know you are. K-Max says Brandon Brown and Tim McDonald seem close. They work together and they're on the road all the time. Couldn't speak to how close they are personally. Godfrey says, if Drew starts, we might have a chance. A-Tone says, if Shane is on the hot seat, likely fired, why is he still scouting players on the road? Well, because, he's still the Giants general manager, and he's still going to do that job until they tell him otherwise. It's possible that, like I said, it's possible that the Giants can get embarrassed on Thursday and the coach could get fired, but the general manager ends up staying to the end of the season and they get fired. It's possible that the coach gets fired after an embarrassing loss and they don't fire the GM. It's possible that they don't fire either. I have been telling you guys, I think that both are going to get fired by the time this season is over. So whether it's during the season, after the season, that's what I think is going to happen based on how bad it's getting and how bad it's gotten. That's how I view it from a standpoint of what I've seen, what I know, and what I think is to come. So far, that has trailed or it's headed in that correct direction as I've predicted. But obviously, if the Giants get one win, right? If they get a win over a crappy Cowboys team here, does it matter much, in the grand scheme? No, but it would at least, for Daboll and Shane's purposes, possibly internally, even though it'd just be one game against a crappy team, but, it could probably buy them some time or at least allow them to breathe and not have to go into, let's say, week 17 and 18 on an 8-game losing streak or 9-game losing streak or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So there are obviously avenues for this to transpire a different way or a more favorable way for them, for the team to bounce back, those kinds of things, A-Tone. But I don't think the fact that he's on the road scouting on the Giants' dime means that he's definitely not getting fired. I think that's his job right now, and it's his job until it's not, right? So, want to thank all of our sponsors right now before we get back into the queue. Thank you, first of all, to my bookie. So I told you guys at the start, I was undefeated 3-0 on my Pats picks in week 12. The Buccaneers, Broncos, and Lions all covering spreads at 6, 5.5, and 7.5. So it wasn't like I went for the small spreads and tried to get some easy ones in. I staked my claim. I stuck my neck out, made you some money there. If you haven't already, there's a big deal here, and it might expire once we get after Thanksgiving. So get in on this, and this is the best way to support this podcast. Open your account on MyBookie, click on the link in my social media profile, and use my promo code PATSPICKS, PATSPICKS. And when you do that, you will get a 100% match on your first deposit of $50 or more, but all the way up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino chip. So that means if you deposit on the link, your first deposit, if you deposit $1,000 into a MyBookie account to start sports gambling on football, following my Pats picks and my Giants sprinkles and prop bets every week, that means you'll get a free $1,000 additionally, and then have $2,000 in your account to play with, to make yourself more money and to enjoy the rest of this football season with me here on the Talkin' Ball Live with Pat Leonard podcast on the Believe Network. So go ahead and do that now. Thanks for supporting Talkin' Ball and MyBookie. And here's a couple deals that you need to know about. Thanksgiving risk-free boost. When you go on MyBookie, MyBookie's boosting the odds that Devon Achane is going to score the first touchdown in the Dolphins-Packers game on Thanksgiving. So if the bet hits, you win. If it doesn't hit, you get your money back. They refund the wager. Max bet there is $25. Also, the Thanksgiving Telegram pool with MyBookie. So subscribe to MyBookie's Telegram channel before Sunday, December 1st, and guarantee your share of $15,000 in free play. All subscribers will share in the free play. And for every 1,000 extra subscribers there are, they'll add 5,000 more to that $15,000 pot. So that's between November 25th and December 1st. Sign up now. Thanksgiving Telegram pool. MyBookie, bet anything, anytime, anywhere. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. Go to boomchaga.com. Use the promo code PATSPICKS right here. Not Pat's Picks. That's MyBookie. Use the promo code TalkinBall25 or the QR code on your screen, and you'll get 25% off your first order of Boom Chaga. It can lower cholesterol. It can reduce inflammation and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. So, boomchaga.com today. Can't recommend it enough. Start feeling the difference today. And brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee. Estate 98 Coffee is a specialty coffee concentrate, perfect for when you want to make a quick cup and skip the lines. Takes me less than 10 seconds to make a delicious cup of Estate 98 iced or hot coffee. It's great as a mixer for espresso martinis, and each bottle makes up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/talkingball to get an exclusive offer for 80% off your first order. Like I said, thank you for everybody for the super chats and just for being here. But the best way to support this channel and this podcast, as I've said, is to support our sponsors, MyBookie, Boom Chaga, Estate 98. Thank you so much for supporting them. All right, back into the queue. Javi says, we should look into Kansas City assistant GM Mike Borgonzi. He's been part of a winning culture for 15 years and counting, and he's worked in every front office role, so he has experience galore. Definitely a name that's been on the interview circuit the last several years, and definitely somebody I would take a look at. I don't disagree with that, Javi. Vish says, hi, Pat. How are you? At least we got a shot at a real quarterback prospect. You got to hope, Vish. You got to hope. And how are you? Good to be here. Thanks for coming back, Vish. A2 says, have to fire Daboll. Can't reward that freaking disaster with more time to cause even more damage. Get out. Vish says, I'm thinking Daboll won't last the season. Congrats and good wishes to Saquon, a good guy and star that escaped the mess and found a real team. Well said there, Vish. David says, hey, Pat, happy Thanksgiving, bro. Same to you, David. Great to see you. Javi says, I also like Ray Agnew, Detroit's assistant GM. He's helped turn the Lions into the best team in the NFC. He's scouted for 20 plus years, and he played for the G-Men in the 90s, so he's familiar with Mara and Tish. Oh, Javi's bringing the GM search right now. Need to get Javi hired as a consultant. I like that. And you're thinking correctly there about some Giants ties, but also kind of using a blueprint that's out there right now, who's succeeding in the modern NFL, to try to take that blueprint and apply it here. And really, you think about it, prioritizing your offensive and defensive lines, especially the offensive line, the running game, hard-nosed football, discipline, motivation, right? Get back to the way that the Giants used to do things and that they have done things at their highest level. Patrick says this is brutal. Daniel says, arriving now. Sorry, I'm late. You think we fire Schoen and or Daboll if we lose on Thanksgiving? I think an embarrassing game, Daniel, on Thanksgiving, like a repeat of Sunday or something close to it. Yes, I think we see firings. No, listen, I want to be clear about this. No one is telling me at this moment, hey, we're going to fire the coach on Friday if this is bad. And no one's telling me at the moment, hey, we're going to fire the GM on Friday if the game is bad. But I can tell you that the pressure was already on them going into this season. And especially at the beginning of the season, the way that the season started at 0-2. My question to Brian Daboll after that Washington game about whether he was concerned about his job security, that the reason he reacted the way he did is that I struck a nerve, because that is exactly where this season was if they went in the tank early, and if they didn't dig themselves out of it, and if they continued to snowball on themselves, which is exactly what's happening where we are. So think about how bad it felt and looked after that Washington game, considering the way they opened against Minnesota, and then also their mismanagement of the kicking situation, the injuries in the game, to lose to Washington. And now look how much worse and further we've fallen from here. Yes, Daniel, I do think that's on the table. I think, in the reporting and news business, this is the time when you end up writing the story of the firings early. It's called putting the story in the can. It's like, hey, have this copy or this type and these stories ready in case this happens. That's a common thing that happens in the newspaper business. It's kind of like, let's get out in front of it, so when the news drops, we're not standing there with nothing ready to run in the newspaper to give everybody the full context of how it went down. That is where we are at. Marshall says we can all hope. Candyman says super depressing, but I lived the same thing from 1966 to 1979. Take heart, folks. It will get better. Mara needs to accept help in finding the next George Young. Yeah, I think definitely the Giants need to, do something different than what they've been doing. It's felt like initially, obviously, from their vantage point, they thought that's what they were doing by going to Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll and not to their next in-house version of Dave Gettleman. But obviously, it has taken them in the wrong direction. Steven says, as the Giants hire Mike Vrabel, Shane Bowen will stay as D coordinator. Giants D has been bad, especially against the run. That's a good point, Steven. And clearly Shane Bowen is not long for, this job, right? And that's, I think part of the reason he got this one is because, so Vrabel's out of the league right now. He'll be back next year. I think once Vrabel's back, you probably end up seeing Bowen go wherever he goes. So that would actually be an argument for why Vrabel doesn't end up here, right? Although I would say, Steven, also, when you talk to people about Tennessee's defense, even though Bowen was the defensive coordinator, it wasn't like he was a well-known name there, really, because everybody said, well, that's Vrabel's defense, so. Mike says, Pat, yes, Barkley should be here instead of Daniel Jones, but you know what our record was every year he was here, 2-8, except every year, except for one, Joe and Brian's first year. That's fact that nobody like you ever mentions. Oh, no, Mike, I definitely would mention that for sure. I think that's a given that they weren't winning when he was here for the most part either. The one year they did win, he was the catalyst on their offense for sure. And then, even when he wasn't producing, he was forcing defenses to account for him and helping open other things up. And then I would also say the argument I think against that is, the Giants' job, just like the Eagles' job, just like any of these NFL teams' jobs, their job is to try to draft good players and also build good enough teams to accentuate those players' strengths, right? And the Giants could have, if they picked better players and built better teams, put Saquon in a position to do what he's doing now for the Eagles. So to say, well, he wouldn't have helped the Giants, well, the Giants don't have as good of a roster as the Eagles because they haven't assembled as good of a roster. So, it's not Saquon's fault that now listen, I was critical of Saquon for different things here, right? Running out of bounds sometimes instead of taking on a hit at the end of runs, pass protection problems, some situational game management mistakes, that kind of stuff. But it's interesting. What the one thing that is happening for him that is a big time advantage for him and for the Eagles now is that the Eagles offensive line is simply getting him through a hole into the second level with speed. And, there was always criticism of Saquon here that he stutter stepped too much in the backfield. Maybe it was because there were no holes. Like you watch him with Philadelphia, he's able to go downhill and hit the hole fast and get into space and take everybody's breath away and take the top off the defense and score 70-yard touchdowns left and right. And it's because the team around him is better. Not a little better, it's way better. So, it's not an argument to me to like, hey, well, we're still glad we don't have Barkley, who might be the MVP of the league. It's like, well, no, it's more of a reflection on you didn't build a good enough roster to accentuate and to prop up and to highlight and maximize the talents of a guy like Barkley. Elias says it's time to clean house, Pat. Forget results. You see disdain for general manager and coach in the eyes of the players. Yes. Why come back and play well for Daboll and Schoen after what's happened? They're not bought in. That's correct, Elias. They are not bought in, no doubt. Intel says, what if Joe Schoen fires Daboll and hires Prime plus drafts his son? Oh, boy. Yeah, that would be interesting. Like I say, no boring days here. That would take that to the nth degree for sure. Brand safety Chris says, can we just fire I don't think that's happening, by the way. Brand safety Chris says, can we just fire everyone and start from scratch? I think that's what's going to happen. Chris says, Pat, please explain to younger Giants fans the history between Dion and the Giants. They're not drafting Shador. That has to be cleared up. Well, Dion, I believe, wasn't the story that he refused to take the Giants, test for draft picks and just like got up and walked out of the meeting and said, like, I'm not doing this. And just wasn't going to play the Giants game. And that was that. Right. Pretty sure that's kind of like the nut graph of the story. But yeah, no, I agree. Doesn't seem like the right match based on their history. Barbara says, Pat, when Shane goes, that Brown guy has to go with him. He's part of the problem. Let's make a clean break. 13th Giant says the New York media will take anything and run with it. Don't know what that's referring to. Barbara says Nabers should concentrate on catching passes. He's not above criticism. Yeah, no, he's not. He shouldn't be above criticism either. So I do think there's plenty to criticize or say that Nabers can learn from in that situation or shouldn't have done. I think also his message that this is a disgusting product and it's not good enough is also, the right one as well. Matt says Daboll gives nothing in press conferences. No, he does not. Luann says Giants should have more wins. Luann, always the eternal optimist, says Giants lost games they should have won. Stupid mistakes, not having a kicker, and I don't want a quarterback in this draft. I love Daboll. Let him finish out his contract. You cannot win by firing coaches and letting players go. The team has to stay together to win and get a Super Bowl. Luann, thank you as always for jumping in and giving us your take. I always love your optimism, and you bring a breath of fresh air. Johnny says the worst thing Mara can do is let Shane pick the next quarterback. If the Giants have another terrible year, this rookie QB will have a new GM and coach the following year. Talk about a clown show. It really has turned into one here. Seriously. Barbara says, I'm not sure the Giants should even waste a high pick on a quarterback in 25. The 24 quarterback class was stronger. Let's consider a free agent or a trade for a QB. Tim says, hey, Pat, should the Giants select Shedeur Sanders, second overall from Colorado in the draft to replace Jones? Tim, I personally think if one of these quarterbacks is somebody that you would judge is going to be the future of your franchise, then you take them. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll did show in this past draft, though, that if they don't believe the guy's a franchise quarterback, they're not going to take him. So what's so interesting about this, and this is another reason why it's hard to trust their evaluations, right? They just had a quarterback class where they passed on 3 guys, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix Jr., who all went pretty soon after the Giants picked. So far, the one of them, Bo Nix, is the leading candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Okay, made into that and helped developed by Sean Payton, and Brian Daboll is supposed to be the offensive coach who identifies and helps that young quarterback blossom. So they passed on that guy, didn't see it there. And to be honest, I didn't see it in Bo Nix at the Senior Bowl either. But I'm not getting paid $3 million or $5 million a year to be an expert on talent evaluation to draft for the Giants. So, but they had judged that Nix wasn't good enough. They did take McCarthy, who Minnesota is very excited about, despite the knee injury and the 2 surgeries. And Michael Penix Jr. will still wait and see. But, the fact of the matter is, Tim, you can't just pick a quarterback to pick one. You have to pick him because you believe he's worth that pick. So, the Giants are in a position, obviously, where they desperately need a quarterback. So you have to expect that they would take one. But we'll see. I mean, they're still evaluating, still a while to go, but clearly they don't have a quarterback and they need one desperately. So is it Shedeur? Is it Cam Ward? Do they not select one there? Do they trade down and take a different quarterback like a Quinn Ewers or a Jackson Dart? Who knows? Barbara says JC Barkley was here for 6 years and didn't produce like he is now. Plus, he refused basically the same contract he got over there. Plus, anyone would know he would go to Philly. Brand Safety Chris says, how come no one talks about Saquon's agent, Ed Berry, not giving Joe Schoen a firm answer on average per year? His agent tried to play the Giants. I think that, Chris, the way that played out was the Giants agent knew that Joe Schoen was not ultimately looking to prioritize Saquon. Like it was more of an idea of you go out and play the market and come back to us rather than we want you and let's do this, right? And let's get it done. So that was how it started. That was the tone that the Giants set. So in the end, when they talked some numbers at the very end before they said goodbye to each other, it was a conversation and a negotiation, but it was, it had already started on the wrong foot, and both of them knew that they weren't going to get to the place that they needed to get to, essentially. Like the agent knew the money that Saquon could get on the market, and the Giants Shane thought A, he wasn't going to get that level of money, and B, wasn't willing to pay it, and Barry knew that. Johnny says, yikes, Shane came off as petty when he was talking to Gore about Saquon and Hard Knocks. Imagine telling Frank Gore that Saquon had too many carries. Shane is clueless. Talk about read the room, dude. Fran is right. Gary Danielson was the quarterback that Lawrence Taylor intercepted in the fourth quarter in the Giants' last Thanksgiving win, 1982, 13-6 win in Detroit over the Lions, and Lawrence Taylor intercepted Gary Danielson in the fourth quarter and returned it 97 yards for a touchdown. Barbara says, I personally think Barkley has had Eagles blood in him for years. He was a huge mistake on the Giants. Creative says, bad decisions from the start. This is what happens when you're cheap. They should have paid Saquon and negotiated with Jones. Craig says, every coach and GM Mara has brought in since Coughlin have failed. None of them have ever been NFL head coaches or GMs prior. Mara is committing malpractice if he doesn't seek out Belichick. Give him the keys. G-Man says, Pat, what are your thoughts on Trump's victory? Do you feel like that's impacted you and asking pissed off questions. I do not think Donald Trump's victory in the election has anything to do with the Giants at the moment. No, I don't. Almighty Finesse says, any chance we get Derrick Henry or T. Higgins in free agency? T. Higgins is a guy the Giants have poked around on and been interested in before. Derrick Henry, obviously, everyone would want to be interested in him. I don't know about that. I think as long as Joe Schoen is the general manager, the answer to that would be no, obviously. Barber says drafting Barkley was a mistake, as was drafting Daniel Jones. No difference, but they didn't produce anything. No excuses. Or they didn't produce anything but excuses. Vinny says, what's up, Pat? Great content. Thank you, Vinny. Welcome. Jacob says, how does the Daily News choose who is beat writer for what sport? Well, all I can speak to, Jacob, is to how they chose me. And basically, I was working on the desk at the Daily News, and I was as an editor for the website. And then I started a fantasy football blog with James Parziali, one of the other editors on the desk. And we were writing consistently on the blog, on the website. And I also was being sent out to be like a freelancer, cover a Red Bulls game here or a practice there or whatever, like a Yankees game there and, Rangers here, whatever. And so once I proved that I could do those things, they started to see my value as a writer. And I also was very loud about my aspirations, about what I wanted to do and what I was excited about. And I was enthusiastic. And I think I was hardworking and genuine. And I even wrote a bunch of headlines for the back page. I got to a point where they trusted me enough where I could shout out my ideas. And sometimes my ideas won out and they would use it on the New York Daily News back page, which was really cool. Then they asked me to cover the Rangers when that opened, and I took that opportunity and ran with it. And then I think I did good enough work and solid enough work where they decided when the Giants beat opened, it was my choice to take it if I wanted it. And so I was aspiring to that. I was excited about that. And I did. And that's how I ended up there. I mean, I think sometimes you end up covering things that are not, let's see. Sometimes if you take the, if you assign somebody to a job that they didn't foresee initially. And so for me, like, for example, I grew up watching a lot of hockey and I liked hockey, but I didn't go to the Daily News thinking like, I hope the Rangers beat opens. That wasn't my aspiration there. So you end up sometimes just receiving the opportunity that opens first. So in that case, if the Nets job had opened up first, whatever, that might've been the job I got. Or if the Mets or the Yankees had opened, maybe I'd gotten, or maybe if the Yankees had opened, maybe they would have moved somebody more senior on the Rangers or a different sport to the Yankees and then move me to the Rangers or, whatever it is. But bottom line is sometimes it's not about this person we know is good at hockey or this person we know aspires to this. It's more like this is what the paper needs. And we need you as the writer, reporter to be versatile and to, do what the company needs. And so then that helps you kind of find your way and learn your way through the business. Chris, I think I missed this last super chat. Sorry about that. I believe I did. Yeah, he said, would they fire a GM if I said I want family out of front office for me to take the job? Chris, you want the GM job? Hey, man, we need somebody else in there. Fresh blood, that sounds good. But I think what you're saying too is you're saying if it's between the current front office and general manager and, replacing him with family like Tim McDonald, which one is preferable, maybe, I think is what you're saying. That's an interesting question. I think that, of course, Tim McDonald's been a part of their personnel decisions with Joe Schoen at the helm here too, for sure. You saw him in the room when all of these decisions were made. You did hear him though saying the thing about Saquon and like, if we're getting rid of him, what does our offense look like? What is our identity? We're losing our touchdowns, all of those things. So, I think I think he has enough personnel chops that would have to be a consideration. All right, let's see. Creative says, why do the Giants keep signing people that never have a chance to start? So many tools, but don't know how to use them. In 25, new tools are coming out. Let's get quality over quantity. Agree. You need quality at key positions. You just need, at a very base level, you need to acquire and add players who you can trust to be adequate replacements, if not starters, right? So you look at some of these NFL teams that they have good enough coaching, and then listen, certain teams battle injuries more than others, Giants being one of them usually. But when guys go down, yes, the player who comes in is not as accomplished or trusted or as good as the last guy who was in there. But between coaching and a baseline level of competence in evaluations of what you need from those players from a quality and physical capability and tools standpoint, you can keep your team playing at a high level because your team building structure and philosophy and the way that you scout players and the traits that you try to acquire for corners versus receivers versus linebackers fit into a certain plan and structure. And the Giants just aren't there at all. The Giants aren't there with, they don't have the ability to pivot, to make things look the same when their backups come in. They don't have the coaching to conceal their weaknesses. That was one thing Martindale was really good at, was concealing the Giants' weaknesses personnel-wise with scheme. Daboll struggles with that. And, he did it well in 2022 for a bit there at the beginning of the season and in a couple of late games, with the running game and Daniel Jones' mobility and that kind of thing. But by and large has really struggled with it as well. A2 says, where do you think Daniel Jones ends up, Pat? He wants to play on a playoff team, so safe to say the Jets are out of the running. I think it's the Vikings, A2. I know I've seen people say that the Ravens are in consideration. I know the Dolphins are somebody to keep an eye on as well. And I guess, the Niners, Cowboys, Eagles are all interesting. I think my pick is the Vikings. My pick is Minnesota. I don't know for sure that he's signing there, but that's my pick. I think Minnesota, A2, has the best combination for Daniel Jones in this moment of they need a backup. They have a starter with an injury history who got kind of banged up. I think Darnold's still scheduled to play this next week, but, a starter with injury history could be banged up, whatever. They're a playoff team, so he's going to get to be in or, at least be on the team for important games. And the number one thing is Kevin O'Connell's the coach I want to go to and play for as a quarterback who's trying to kind of rehabilitate myself. That's what I would do. And Daniel's smart enough to know that. Jacob says, Pat, any idea who else we interviewed last GM cycle? Yeah. Ryan Poles, who is the Chicago Bears general manager now. Adam Peters, who is now the general manager of the Washington Commanders. So, you see how the dominoes fall, with searches like that. Really, really interesting how it all comes together and then where guys end up. I know they also interviewed, it was Ryan Cowden from the Titans, who is now, right-hand man to Joe Schoen. Monty Ossenfort from the Tennessee Titans, now with the Arizona Cardinals. Let's see. You have, who else was it? Adrian Wilson from the Cardinals, and then Rand Carthon of the 49ers, who is now the Tennessee Titans general manager. Mike C says Daboll is an offensive genius whose teams can't score points. Mike, I didn't see that one coming. You were funny. That is funny. Exactly. Well, the bottom line is, you know, you're either an offensive coach who knows how to draft a guy like Bo Nix and turn him into the offensive rookie of the year, or you're not. You know, we need a disciplinarian coach, says Javi. That player friendly stuff doesn't work for New York. We won with Parcells and Coughlin, not with the type of Hanley or Daboll. Tough, not soft leadership. Javi turning in an MVP level performance as far as the quality of his comments in this chat. Johnny says, I never understood the argument people have that we weren't winning with Saquon, so it's fine he was let go. Well, we're not winning with Dex or Andrew Thomas also. Should we let them go too? Makes no sense. Exactly, Johnny. Silly. Javi says, I hope we can get back to winning so you can write a Super Bowl book and make some money, Pat. Nobody wants to read books about losers. That's right. That's right. From your lips to God's ears, Javi. Thank you. Aziki says, that's a valid point, Johnny. Should have kept McKinney and Leonard Williams too, then, if that's the case. At some point, you can't pay everybody. But I agree, Barkley walking for nothing was terrible. Yeah, you know, Aziki, you're right. Every situation is different for sure. You can't just group them all into one thing necessarily. But what you can group them all into is the Giants players' frustrations that, you know, it's like we're getting rid of all of our best players. What are we doing? Or we're getting rid of a lot of our good players and leaders. What are we doing? And so it's no coincidence and not a surprise that the team is worse. A2 says Luann is Daboll's YouTube account. I love it. Hooks says they should have had that players only meeting weeks ago. Like I said, happy to see some players with fire in their belly about losing. I still would rather draft a quarterback this year like Ward or Sanders, no one else. Madden's past says Michael Penix Jr. is a baller. Hooks says, meaning no other quarterbacks on my list this year other than Shador and Ward. Old point, but Saquon didn't have the line with us that he has this season. He's running through wide gaping holes with Philly. Exactly. Mike C says the head coaches we've brought in had good first years, then garbage. Bill Parcells was terrible first year, then Super Bowls. Right. Right, Mike, that's a really good point. What they need to do is properly evaluate their team. That's what they need to do. Ownership on down. Ownership, general manager, coach. You need to properly evaluate your team. I think that speaks to, like, Joe Schoen, what he said at that press conference about how they basically, you know, overreacted to the success of 2022 and that it blinded them to the fact that they still had a long ways to go. Criminal mistake. You know, I'm using that word. Obviously, it's not literal, but how could you be blinded by the success of a 9-7-1 season? What are we talking about? Almighty says, if we hire Mike Vrabel, King Henry would come here and both reunite. Interesting. I like it. D-Kid says Shane's initial plan in 22 was scrapped after the season. Then he scrapped his 23 plan after the season. Now his most recent plan in 24 looks like it's going to be scrapped too. Just great. That's a really good point, D-Kid. Yeah, no, the worst thing that they did as a regime was, well, obviously the Daniel Jones, you know, signing and, you know, obviously signing Daniel Jones to that contract and letting Saquon Barkley eventually go. That's the one that's going to get everybody fired. But the biggest mistake they made was generally coming out of the first season and thinking that they had figured it out and that they were really close. That was the biggest mistake they made, because then it made them their misevaluation led to them doing the wrong things with their roster, and that led their team down the wrong path and steered them in the wrong direction and helped them regress. D-Kit, well said. Chris says Hard Knocks transcript. Okay, so that's if I offered him today a 3-year deal at 12.5 APY and 25, he'd be a Giant. Saquon allowed his agent to screwed up the negotiation twice. Talk is cheap, and he wanted the bag more than leaving a legacy. Well, they just had a market on the open market, and they felt like the Giants should pay him what he felt like he was worth. And so there was a long history of negotiations there where the Giants were not going to the numbers that he was getting and wanted. Pat says, I read an article in 2020, I think from a Browns reporter. John Dorsey missed on a ton of picks. He battled to get control from Andy Reid. Yeah, no, definitely not perfect. But if you're looking for experience and a no nonsense, hard nosed experienced person, that would be somebody. But yeah, just talking about candidates, I'm not calling for them to hire him. Baldini says, I think bringing in Bill Belichick would help bring in a winning culture. I think that would have to be their first call. I agree. George says, good night, Pat. What are your sources telling you about Brian and Joe getting fired? Nobody telling me it's definitely coming, right? Or it's definitely not coming. But I can tell you that, coming out of that Buccaneers loss, the way the locker room acted, I mean, the dysfunction and the intensity, the pressure, and the stakes are at an all-time high for the general manager and for the coach. This is a worst case scenario for them in almost every way, in the management of their team, to how Saquon's performing, Xavier McKinney's performing, looking at what the Giants have let go, looking what they still have, poor effort on the field in key spots, and winless at home, 6 straight losses, no points in the first half of their last 2 games, lowest scoring team in the NFL. It just, and on and on and on. One thing I did want to share with you guys before we get out of here. So Baldini says draft Sanders and having Bill Belichick would be a hell of a storyline and put fans back in the seats. Almighty Finesse says, man, I can't wait for April. It will be another interesting offseason, that's for sure. One thing I did want to share with you guys, the injury report that came out today. So we find out final injury designations and game statuses tomorrow, Wednesday on the 27th. Here on the 26th, the Giants, obviously, they added Tommy DeVito, which was a pretty wacky development, considering he obviously should have been on Monday's injury report because he got pummeled in the game on Sunday. But whatever games are going on there, he was limited. They called it a right forearm. Tommy said that his entire body was sore and said that his neck was stiff. So obviously a lot going on there. Dexter Lawrence was upgraded to full. Evan Neal was upgraded to limited. Seems like Neal will likely play. Jermaine Illuminor, I'm not confident will play. So you're probably looking at Chris Hubbard at left tackle and Evan Neal at right tackle. Armin Watts, the defensive tackle with a shoulder, didn't participate. Obviously, didn't mention this yet. Azeez Ojulari went on injured reserve with a toe injury. Disappointing, obviously, that they had a market for him at the deadline. Didn't trade him, didn't get anything for him. He's a pending free agent, and then he gets hurt, and now he's on IR, out at least 4 games. They claimed Greg Dulcich, a tight end from the Denver Broncos, off of waivers. That is a position, man. I know tight end's not like the premium position, but talk about a position Joe Schoen just can't figure out. I mean, he spent a 4th-round pick on Daniel Bellinger. He spent a 3rd-round pick in the trade for Darren Waller. He restructured and gave more money to Darren Waller. He spent a 4th-round pick on Theo Johnson. Now we're claiming Greg Dulcich, a former draft pick, mid-round pick of the Broncos. I mean, one of these days going to get it right. I do like Chris Manhertz as a guy, run blocker, and who can be a red zone threat, and he's a leader as well. But just can't seem to kind of pop on that position. Otherwise, with the Giants, McFadden, Newbin, Johnson, Davidson, Banks, all limited. And, no projections toward not playing for those guys from what we understand, but we'll wait and see the statuses on Wednesday. Cowboys, interestingly, Trayvon Diggs, the corner, was downgraded to did not participate today from limited on Monday with a groin and a knee. So that's noteworthy, obviously, because Malik Nabers had a really tough time with him in their first matchup. So that would obviously be interesting if he couldn't go. CeeDee Lamb's going to play, but was limited with a back and a foot, was talking today about how he was banged up. And then looks like they're banged up at linebacker too. We got Eric Kendricks with a groin and a shoulder, did not participate. Zach Martin, their starting guard, ankle and shoulder. Nick Vigil with a foot. Dallas obviously played a lot better against Washington last week and has, significantly more talent when it comes to just the pure roster compared to the Giants. Have already beaten them once this season. So we'll see where that goes. But that is your injury report for the game. As we sit here on Tuesday, we'll see what the final designations are on Wednesday going into Thanksgiving Day's game. All right, to round us out here, let's see. We got Finesse says, are the Browns going to fire Stefanski and promote Vrabel as head coach? Don't know about that. We'll see. That it is warm over there, though. The Browns did just get a big win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And why? Because in part, they signed a good backup quarterback who they trust and gave the ball to when it was time in Jameis Winston, a guy that the Giants could have had. Almighty says it's either Belichick or Vrabel. D-Kid says, so Pat, map things out that need to happen in order for our beloved Giants to return to respectability. I would like to hear just how daunting a task it is, if you don't mind. You got it, D-Kid. So I would say the most daunting. So one sec. I need a sip of water first before I get into it. It's a long explanation. So to return to respectability, I think what the Giants need to do first is they need a new general manager with some personnel chops who's going to pick better players. That's first. I think the second thing they need is a coach who's going to hold players accountable, and between the coach holding players accountable and the general manager selecting the right types of players and people for the team, I think they need to build back up the way the locker room, who are the locker room leaders, who is the leadership, who sets an example of what it means to be a Giant. I think they need to get back to that formula. I think there are prominent players in this locker room now who, even if they have some talent, they're not steering players and people in the locker room in the right direction. And I think it's a weak locker room mentally, in part because of that. I think that, what I would be looking for especially would be a way to prioritize consistently the offensive and defensive lines. I know we talk about that all the time, but I really think, and I'm not saying go pay the next Saquon Barkley and spend $1 gazillion on a running back. It's not what I'm saying necessarily, but I feel like it's such bad timing that it was like Joe Schoen took a stand on positional value, just as around him, the NFL is going back to the run game, And I think if the Giants lean into who they've been and what their true identity is, which is running the ball and playing good defense, and we all know, D-Kit, they need to hit on a big time quarterback, get a star quarterback, right? And you want to be able to throw the ball around the yard and all that. But what I'm saying is the Giants formula of run the ball, play strong defense, play with attitude, play with effort, be hard to play against. Teams don't look forward to playing you, right? Like those kind of things. I think this is an advantageous time for the Giants to just get back to what their blueprint has always been, but like going into this year without depth on their interior defensive line, without addressing that, huge mistake. Going into this year with an offensive line where they desperately tried to patchwork it, and they still just don't have required depth or sufficient talent at certain key spots. Like, you're setting up your team to fail, and it's just regime upon regime upon regime that keeps getting this stuff wrong. To me, D-Kit, if they were able to get good leaders, if they were able to return accountability to the building, and if they were able to fix the lines, look at Detroit, how their line is built, their team is built from the inside out, and with a general manager who has, made the most out of high picks and good assets. And, you got Penei Sewell fell into his lap, right? You take Jahmyr Gibbs, those kind of things. They get the trade going for Jared Goff, trading Matt Stafford out of there. Obviously a unique situation, but they just have high-end talent, and they have lines that beat you up, that physically impose on you. And they have a motivator coach who all the players would give their right arm to play for, not an overly complicated formula there, right? Maybe that's what I'm saying. Go do what the Lions did at this point. Hook says, look back at Saquon's draft. The next best option at quarterback was Darnold, Josh Allen, then Lamar Jackson. We see how Darnold did at Jets. I hoped for Lamar, but we drafted Lawletta. Ouch. Almighty says, can't forget Julian Love when it comes to other Giants succeeding and who were let out of here with the leadership. Yes, Julian was a big part of that as well. Evan says, there is a clear divide in the locker room based on what some players have said. Is the locker room starting to fall apart? Can Daboll save the season in any way? I don't think he can save the season. Yeah, I think the divide in the locker room and on the team is there's certain players just starting to say, listen, like not everybody's pulling in the same direction, and there's only so much we can tell certain guys. And when players say that, it's all part of losing and frustrations. And even if it's not finger pointing in certain situations, it's definitely just frustrations coming out in different ways that they know they can't get it done. That's what it is. And yes, there are some players on the field who don't get it done more than others. But to me, I think all the players know deep down that they're all responsible for it. And is there a divide in the locker room? There's definitely certain players who are more targeted when it comes to, frustration than others. And there's certain different messages coming from different guys. But I think really what I see is some of the veterans, like especially like Dexter almost comes off like a guy who, is insulted that he's connected to a product like this. But to me, he's, in the game against the Buccaneers, at least he was a part of it. So you have to kind of suck it up, take a deep breath. And you know what I think though, Evan, I think they're fatalistic right now. Like I think they know what this is that is not getting better. And I think it's frustration. And no, I don't think there's anything Daboll can do about it. No other quarterback available to us amounted to anything in the league. Says Hooks. Almighty says that would be crazy if we got Aaron Rodgers and Belichick. Yeah, I don't think so. Mara has to, at the very least, make a call to Belichick, says Kevin. Yes, agree. D-Kid says, I completely agree with your assessment, Pat. Let me recap. New GM, new coach, new players, real leaders, quality trench play. Yeah. That's where I would start. Get me new management and coaches, Jameis and Shador, and let it ride, he says. Ryan says, good coaches are good leaders and build a winning culture. The Lions were horrible for 2 years, but Dan Campbell would say, we're going to keep working. Yep, exactly. But they were tough, and they didn't get rid of their tough and good players, right? That's something that really stuck out to me. You don't get rid of your good and tough players. Guys like John Feliciano, Nick Gates, even remember Richie James, like he was kind of like a guy who just did what he was told and played a role. Like they just had so many guys who were key pieces of the way they were made up. And yeah, it's a shame. Hooks says, thanks for your time and insight, Pat. Thank you, Hooks, Rubs, and Spices for being here. And thanks for participating and thanks for supporting. Guys, remember, we are always live here with Talking Ball with Pat Leonard during the week at least once and after every Giants game. So I look forward to seeing you at Talking Ball post-game live on Thanksgiving Day from AT&T Stadium in Dallas. So after the Giants-Cowboys game, I will be live on YouTube. The channel is PL on NFL. Subscribe now. Make sure your notifications are on. So even if you forget, it'll pop up on your phone, pop up on your computer, pop on your television and tell you that I am live from Dallas talking about your Giants after I watch that game live, after I go into the Giants locker room, and after I talk to Brian Daboll and the players. Thank you to all the people who purchased Super Chats. Thank you for supporting all of our sponsors. Please remember to support our sponsors. One more time, that would be MyBookie. I was 3-0, undefeated at MyBookie with my picks in Week 12. I'll be giving out more picks on Wednesday for Thanksgiving and some more bets for the weekend coming up on Friday as well. But you need to know they have a Thanksgiving risk-free boost. MyBookie is boosting the odds that Devon Achane is going to score the first touchdown for the game in the Dolphins-Packers Thanksgiving game. So if it doesn't hit, they refund your money. And if it wins, you hit. So max wager there is $25. Go get that. They also have a Thanksgiving Telegram pool. So subscribe to MyBookie's Telegram channel. Go on their Telegram channel, subscribe there before December 1st to guarantee your share of $15,000 in free play. Can't beat that. Use my promo code PatsPicks. So go to the link in my social media profile, use the promo code PatsPicks, and you will get a 100% match on your first deposit all the way up to $1,000. So that means if you go to MyBookie, you sign up and you make your first deposit of $1,000, you'll get another $1,000 for free in your account. That's $2,000 to play with, an extra grand to use to tail my bets, my giant sprinkles, my NFL prop bets, my parlays, and these Pats picks that have been hitting and making you money. If you remember, last week I also gave out Bucks to win by more than 15 points at plus 220. And that hit. That was money. That was easy money. Also brought to you here by by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. That's a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. And if you use the discount code TalkinBall25 or access it through the QR code on your screen, you'll get 25% off your first subscribe and save order. Right now, that means a month's supply costs you only $30. Start feeling the difference today at boomchaga.com. You can actually see that's TalkinBall25 and the QR code right here. 25% off at boomchaga.com. And last but not least, brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, a specialty coffee concentrate. Perfect for when you want to make a quick cup and skip the lines. It takes me less than 10 seconds to make a delicious Estate 98 iced or hot coffee. It's great as a mixer for espresso martinis, and each bottle can make up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/talkingball to get an exclusive offer for 80% off your first order. Thank you to everybody who was here. Thank you to everyone who supported, especially the super chatters. Chris Spires weighed in with several, Daniel Hirsch, Elias as well. You guys really brought it. Javi had some really great comments about general manager candidates and the way he wants to see the team built. D-Kit rounded it out by getting me talking about the blueprint for the way the Giants should go from here and how they can turn it around and reinvigorate their organization and their tradition. You know what's interesting? We've forgotten about this, but the Giants are in their 100th season, their centennial season. That's something they haven't talked about a lot anymore. That's something we haven't heard as much. But man, oh man, how embarrassing that is that the Giants are in their centennial season, and this is how it's turning out. 0-7 in their last 7 against the Dallas Cowboys, 1-14 in their last 15, 0-5 under Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, outscored 160-68 in those games. They'll try to turn it around on Thanksgiving Day against Cooper Rush, Mike McCarthy, Micah Parsons, and the Dallas Cowboys. But something interesting to watch, Micah Parsons has been piling on the Saquon Barkley social media, kind of Giants rubbing in their faces. He was screaming out on Twitter after Saquon went off for over 300 yards against the Rams, that the Giants let him go for nothing. Can you believe that? Micah Parsons, Saquon Barkley are friendly. Parsons undoubtedly, in no uncertain terms, is looking to come out and dominate Thanksgiving and try to embarrass the Giants for himself. They passed on him in the draft. For Saquon Barkley, his friend, and to continue, kind of like Baker Mayfield did, to show up a Giants team that right now is on the ropes, to say the least. I would leave you with this. I do think there's a chance that by the time we get to next Monday, if not sooner, that the Giants have fired somebody prominent in the organization. If Drew Lock plays, who knows? That's a wild card. Obviously, Malik Nabers talking to Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, having so little targets early in these games, you have to imagine that the game plan is going to be something more competent as it relates to trying to get him involved and trying to get him to ignite the offense and have the Giants in the game before it's too late. Because Nabers made a good point. He basically said, I'm trying to get involved early to help change the game. When you get me involved later, It's like my body's not activated. I don't feel the same way. It's hard to just jump in and turn it on and ignite the offense in the game when we're down. We're not scoring in the first half. Here's a crazy stat to leave you with. In the first quarter of the Giants' last 5 games, Malik Nabers has 1 catch for 13 yards on 4 targets. Let me say that again. 5 games the Giants have played, their last 5 games. In those 5 games total, Nabers has 1 catch in the first quarter of those 5 games for 13 yards on 4 targets. That can't happen. That's the reason he was frustrated and pissed off. They can't score. They can't win. They need to turn it around now. And where we stand now is that we're looking at a lively and an explosive Talkin' Ball post-game live in Dallas, in Arlington, Texas, after the game on Thanksgiving Day. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, Pat, says D-Kit. D-Kit, right back at you. To everybody here, happy Thanksgiving. And I hope as you're enjoying your pumpkin pie or your pecan pie or your second helping of turkey, those seconds, they always hit, right, at the Thanksgiving table, man, those leftovers, right, the seconds going back for more. I hope whenever you're enjoying those things, this is making me hungry talking about it, by the way. I hope you will check out Talkin' Ball post-game live with Pat Leonard after the Giants and the Cowboys play. Flying all the way down there, leaving my family to go cover the Giants and bring you the most up-to-date news, information, breaking news, information, injury info, updates on the team, on the front office, on the coaches, on the game plans, and to give you my unique analysis, insight, and my original takes on where the team is and where it's going to go from here. See you there, post-game live, Thursday, Thanksgiving Day from Arlington, Texas. Take care, and thank you for being here, and happy Thanksgiving to you and yours.